Hello, everyone. This is Lenny DellaRocca along with Michael O'Mara of South Florida Poetry Journal, SoFloPoJo. And we're here this morning with Libby Burton at the Miami Book Fair. In fact, Libby's going to be reading in about an hour, even less than an hour from now. And I want to welcome you, Libby, for coming down and talking with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be in Miami.
And you were telling me before that you're from New York City. Is this the first time you're in Florida?
No, actually, maybe the third or fourth.
Wow.
I love Miami, so I try to get vacation here when I can. I've been to Key West, love Key West.
Yeah. Your book is Soft Volcano. Is this your first book?
It is my first book.
And it's one I was telling you before. I was reading through this, and the poems are just absolutely stunning. And I wonder if you could, let's start this off by reading a poem that you're going to be reading later on at the book fair.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. This is called Irrefutable Evidence. The people you love consume glasses of orange juice when you're not there. Arms and hearts moving thoughtlessly, intact. It'll be the wind eating stones, horses, an ice cube knocking against teeth that convinces you. Perhaps light on the hairs of the tomato vine. The heads of bourbon roses float in a crystal bowl inside a city where you are both mayor and black silk stocking caught in a tree. Tonight, a nearby wood is thinking of you. Soon the street lamps will begin to switch on, for those who attended the burial have all gone home.
Wow. I'd like to talk a little bit about that poem. There's so many great images in it, and like the rest of the poems in the book, like what I was saying before, you have these great lines, and I, when you read something and somebody says to me, "Oh, that's really a great line," I think to myself, does that mean the rest of the poem isn't? Is that the only thing that stands out that much? What about the rest? But that does not happen with yours, because it's like one after the other, and at least in this book, they're short poems. There's really nothing long, and so they're very compressed. Can you talk about how that poem came about?
Sure. So I have always wanted to explore big abstract ideas in my poems. Desire, death, intimacy, sex, legacy of what we adopt from our parents, what we pass on to other people, ambition. But the only way to talk about those things, I believe, is in the actual specificity of images, right? And so that's how I came to poetry. It wasn't necessarily through sort of spoken word or anything like that. It was reading these big ideas that were distilled down to small images that just felt true and resonated with me. So that's always been the way in for me. And the more strange and sort of surprising I can create, I can sort of put things together in a way, the more exciting it is to me. And, that's a lot of my teachers that I've sort of taken from. I worked with Lucy Brock-Broido, whom we lost recently, and she, I think, is a teacher and a writer who did that so beautiful, just surprising people with how the distance between two things can be just sort of collapsed. And then there's power in that, so.
There certainly is. I was going to ask about Lucy. I learned about her passing last year at AWP, which was in March, and I think she had died. In fact, it was the night that I was at a reading they had mentioned it.
Yeah, it was like right before that, a couple weeks before that, yeah.
Very, very sad.
Yeah.
But you mentioned some of your teachers. I believe in the book it mentions who? Brenda Shaughnessy?
Brenda Shaughnessy. And she was someone who I read when I was 18 or 19, like very young, and sort of reading her and just sort of like the sexual electricity in her work, and coming across that and saying like, oh, this is it. This is the things I want to recreate. And I eventually got to work with her when I was at Columbia.
Nice.
And then also Lisa Russ-Spar, who runs the MFA program at University of Virginia, and the poetry program there. And she's just, again, an incredible writer who finds the unexpected and the bizarre and sort of the pathos in the everyday. Yeah. And a lot of female influence you'll see, and that's definitely something I've inherited. Incredible women writers all the way back to Emily Dickinson, sort of finding surprising things about women in the world.
Sure. Speaking of Emily, one of the blurbs, I believe, in the back here from Lisa Russ-Spar says, an examined inner life with her own brand of Dickinsonian lability. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was a question I was going to ask you. it's a cliche now to say that the two pillars of modern poetry, right, Whitman and Dickinson, and I suppose you identify more toward Dickinson than Whitman, and the poems sort of suggest that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Those are both, again, it is a cliche, but all cliches have a grain of truth in them.
Sure.
And the older I get, the more I sort of see it's not fruitful to necessarily dismiss things as a cliche. I read a lot of both of those at a great, rigorous English and poetry education as an undergrad. And I think I loved Whitman's expansiveness and surprisingness and also sensuality in his work. But kind of going back to short poems, right?
Right.
So I'm a book editor by day and a poet as well. And I think that there is definitely like a lost appreciation for short, succinct statements.
Yeah.
And also in our, where poetry is competing with Instagram. So how do you kind of keep people's attentions? And I think if you can say something sharp and direct in a very sort of small period of time, be it in a novel or a memoir or a poem, I think that that's effective. And Emily Dickens did that first, so yeah.
And saying that, is there a poem that you'd like to read that sort of speaks to that?
I do have a poem, actually. This poem both shouts out social media and Florida.
Okay, there we go.
So I'll read that. There we go. It's called...
I have the book.
Oh yeah, no, I got it. I had to reshuffle. Are you normal tonight? The arterial beauty of Florida is alive in all of its obesity, and the sequin sellers are doing good business east of Granada Boulevard. The sad-eyed woman's ultrasound image, all dirty blur of gray and ambiguous genitalia, sits lovingly electric on your newsfeed. And the neighbor with his disorder you invented is going out tonight. The starlet will eat a sandwich and Kevin will push the joke too far, the vomit, the bobby pins. And that's okay tonight. And your mother, with her rough hands, her quiet advice, has walked along the sidewalk, knowing how cold a wooden house can feel, wondering whose soft, strange lips she could kiss.
Well, when I hear you read, and then as I was reading your work in the book, Soft Volcano, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what did she take out to get here, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems to me that, as we all do, in going back over a first draft or second draft, we take stuff out, you start rearranging. In this particular poem, were there other things do you remember any other lines or any other ideas that did not make it in that you ended up, putting aside to get to this poem?
Totally. I think this idea of sitting lovingly electric on your newsfeed. I've always sort of tried to exist using my language to exist in a place that's feels fresh but not too contemporary of the moment. So for a long time I would never write. You'd never find Instagram or Twitter or any of these sort of like the internet, those words in my poetry. But this concept, and I tried hard. I'm like, how can I sort of portray those things because they're such integral aspects of our life now. But this idea of like the news feed, which applies to so much of the media and the information that we're receiving from both people we know intimately, strangers, world leaders, it's all coming out of us and it's a constant stream. So it took me a while to sort of constellate that, but I really love the word newsfeed. And I hit on that and it felt right.
It really works. The idea of this idea of using the news feed or Instagram. In fact, there's Instagram poems now. And I don't use Instagram, but I understand you put something in and it goes away after a while, it just disappears or something. It's not like there's a Twitter feed or a Facebook post where it stays forever.
And I think Instagram's forever. It's Snapchat that disappears.
Oh, okay. Well, you see where I am.
It's always all changing. Yeah.
Instagram stays, okay, but it's Snapchat. In any event, are there friends, a partner, other poets that you share your initial drafts with before you kind of really say they're done?
Yes, it took me a long time, but I have a group of 3 other poets whom I found via the 92nd Street Y, which is this amazing literary institution in New York, where I was an intern at one time and then sort of came to befriend my colleagues there. And Ricardo Maldonado, who is this incredible American Puerto Rican poet, he and I trade drafts, and Will Lobko, who is another poet and teacher in New York, and Maud Poole, who's a poet of New York, and now she lives up in Buffalo, which is far for us, but we still sort of trade stuff by email.
Yeah.
But they're my readers and they're my people, and it might be a cliche as well too, but to sort of find your audience and find your readers, it makes all the difference in the world. And I worked through this book, and I reworked this book, and I retitled this book, and I reordered this book in their presence and in their sort of support and their thinking. So I think any writer out there who thinks, oh, I don't need a community, or, I still haven't found mine yet, like, keep trying, and you'll find your people. And it makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, it does. What was another title for the book?
Oh, my God.
I'm putting you on the spot.
I was working a lot with, like, the idea of houndstooth. I really like the name, like,
I like software came out better.
Me too. And that's why it got published under that name too. And sort of the idea of like a mouth and like the danger of a mouth. Mouth is both, it's sort of like an orifice. It's like sexual, but it's also dangerous. There's teeth involved. So it took a while. But then, SoFvolcano was the right title.
There's also a poem in here, SoFvolcanoes. And do you mind reading that? And then I think we might be running out of time because I know you've got to go read.
Yeah, let me grab it. I don't have it. I'm not reading it today, but I have
okay.
it in my special copy. All right.
And I'm going to ask Michael if he wants to ask you something. I've been taking up all the oxygen.
All right. SoFvolcano. We've done little harms to each other, and we shared soup when the moment was right. Remember the nights we animaled until full dawn, got vicious and chomped the starlight. The darkness spread like sick around this place. I will stop dead for the marvelous mouth of you, even if our skins droop and waver, cleft and lift at inopportune times. Now the scent of baby heads, of mother mouths and dishes. Good morning, little headache of this life I inadvertently chose. I wish to make a ravishing of you. Let's stomp around without apology. Surrender again today.
Wow. Again, wow. We animaled. That is so incredible. And there was the mouths in that.
Yeah,
poem.
I know.
Speaking
Exactly.
of
Comes
mouths,
back.
right?
I mean, part of why I got into poetry is because there are no rules, right? And
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And you do that so well. I mean, this is your first book, and this is it's just incredible. It's just amazing.
Thank you.
What's the word I'm looking for? The energy and the heightened language of this for a first book.
Thank
a
you.
debut.
Well, I'll say it was first book, but definitely 10 years worth of poems in there.
Oh,
so,
absolutely.
As you know,
I mean, reading this, you know that this is not something that you just.
But just for anyone who's writing, like,
absolutely.
it takes a long time. As I had colleagues and other writers I work with who say like, oh, but you also wrote a book of poetry. It's like, well, there aren't that many words in there, but each word
absolutely
takes some time.
They're packed full of energy.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have any questions for Libby?
There's just some amazingly bold things that you do in your poetry. When you look at In the Office of My Heart's Desire, you read it on the page, and my first reaction to it is I want to hear the poet, because there's competing voices in this poem, and I just found it precious. There's a poem, Dreaming the Places My Father's Tongue Has Been in Summer, and you take a line like incandescent with the promise of exception, which is wonderfully ethereally abstract, and then you come right back to an image, his hands holding a map like smoke. So you travel in and out of concrete images and abstraction quite frequently, and you really are pretty brave in terms of sexuality in these poems. Did you get any pushback from that? Was it hard to get the book?
Only from my parents now. No, well, kidding, not kidding. No, I mean, I think that like our worlds and our lives are sort of saturated with like desire and lust, and like that is just part of the spectrum of human existence, right? Like it's not taboo, it's not unaccepted, it's just part of what makes us human, and that's what excites me. And you know, my parents had like and my family had read some of these poems. I think reading the whole thing together, they're like, oh, okay. But also I just said to them, listen, like this is part of being human, and I feel very lucky to be in this world and be able to explore these things without repercussion, because we live in, that's no small thing, but we live in America. We live in a place where we can write about these things.
For now.
For now. Funny, not funny. Yeah, so I've never really gotten any pushback. I've had to work through my own sort of embarrassment, but also to say like, listen, this is what concerns me, and this is what I keep coming back to. Exactly, and I think that deserves to be sort of trumpeted and explored.
It's one of the hallmarks of poetry today. Is people are just saying, you know, there's no taboo. Yeah,
and I think with that. As Stan Lee famously wrote, you know, with that power comes great responsibility. Rest in peace. But like, yeah, sure, there's no taboo, but like, you have to sort of like, what are you adding to the conversation? Sure. What are you exploring that's going to help another reader feel seen, feel normalized? Because we're all weirdos, and if you can make someone else sort of feel normal in what they're feeling and experiencing, then I think that's powerful.
Absolutely.
Do you think your perspective as a publisher and as an author helped you in the pursuit of getting the book published?
Definitely. My sort of the insight from that is, as someone who has dozens and dozens of manuscripts sent to me every single day, is like, if you don't have something original and urgent to say, no one has time for you. Yeah. And that's harsh, but it is just true. And going back to like, yeah, we're competing sort of as, you know, as publishers ourselves, like we're competing with Donald Trump and Instagram, and sort of how are you going to stay relevant? So definitely that, my experience as an editor helped me sort of hone this collection, make it feel urgent, make it feel necessary. And also like designing the cover. This beautiful, beautiful cover that I'm going to mispronounce her name, but Robin Volnich, I think, designed is, you know, it's sexy, it's sort of like evocative, but it's eye-catching. And I think that's part of this as well, too. It's like, why produce an object in the world that people pay for? Make it beautiful, make it powerful, make it relevant. So
you certainly did.
Excellent.
Well, Libby, I really appreciate you coming in here. We both do, and thank you so much.
I appreciate you too.
Welcome back to Miami.
Thank you.
We hope to see you in a little bit at your reading.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Thanks.